Okay, hello guys. Welcome to this Teach English in China Zoom discussion. So my name is Arnold Vis. I'm the director of Teach English in China. And I've always felt that working abroad is such an incredible experience because you go to a new country, you change that country to some extent in terms of your presence, and the country certainly changes you. And certainly, as you're also teaching, it's rewarding on so many levels. I think one element that's part of that experience is that obviously something that you bring to the country is your race or your ethnic background. And when it comes to China and teaching and living there, that's something that over the years has come up quite a bit in terms of people asking me about it, potential applicants and other people. Um, I've always found this quite a difficult topic to get into because it's quite a complicated topic with many aspects to it. But today we're going to talk about it, and it's also in part because James Prescott-Kerr, who's with us today, has written a really phenomenal book about this. I've just finished it, and it was an amazing read. So the title of the book is "Teacher Black: My Year in China," and it is in large part about his experience as a British Black teacher in China. So we're also joined today by Sabrina, who was teaching in China the same year as James. So guys, if you briefly introduce yourselves.
I'll let you go first, James.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you very much. And, yeah, so very kind words from you, Arnold. It's much appreciated. Yeah, my name's James Prescott-Kerr. I am the author of Teacher Black. That felt really good to say. Wow. I need to take that in for a bit. Yeah, I'm the author of Teacher Black. I'm also a writer, copywriting. I've written articles, and I'm also in working in market research right now. And yeah, I'm just trying to, also a musician, but yeah, I'm just trying to pretty much spread the message about my journey and the book, and just hoping that anyone that has invested in China, in the experience, the Black experience in general, and just traveling abroad and how to adapt to those experiences, I'm just hoping everyone can pick something up from what I've written.
Hey, I'm Sabrina, Sabrina Erdogan. Oh God, that's weird to say actually because I changed to Erdogan this year. I'm a teacher. I teach history and psychology, and I went to China in the same year as James in 2015. I ended up staying for 2 years, which I didn't expect. I intended to stay for a year, but I loved it. It was amazing. It was an experience. It was a journey. But it's something that I always look back on, and it stayed with me. It stayed with me till this day.
So my name is Arnold Vis, and I used to teach in China in Wuhan in 2002 and 3. And a few years after I came back, I just thought, okay, this is something a lot more people would want to do. So I was one of the co-founders of Teach English in China at that time. So in that role, what I'd want to say is that this is going to be us chatting about this experience, something I greatly enjoy in general about the Teach English in China community and the alumni. Going to a place like China, there's always so much to talk about, and that's essentially what we're going to do today. There are personal opinions. It's not a company statement on race in China. It's not possible to do that in a place as large, as dynamic as China. So I wanted to make that clear. Another thing I want to make clear is that this is about experiences in China and our reflections on that. It's definitely not a case of eligibility. If you meet the criteria for this program, you can apply, you will be placed, you will be going to China. So it's definitely not a comment in any way about eligibility. So we're going to have sort of approach this discussion in, we've divided it into 4 topics. So the 4 key topics we're going to talk about are basically, first, our experiences in China itself when it came to this topic of race and sort of just what it was like. After that, we'll go into the impact of that had on us in terms of the general experience and how we felt about it. Topic number 3 is hospitality in China, because that is something that everyone that's been to China is familiar with. It's an amazing element of Chinese culture, and I felt it was quite relevant to this discussion and the sort of overall evaluation on it, to talk a little bit about hospitality and the friends we've made, the kindness we've received in China. The final topic is basically conclusions, advice, anything that's if we felt it was worth saying that hadn't been brought up yet. As James obviously is the author of this book, what we'll do is kick off every segment with a quote from his book, and I hope this loads okay. So the first topic is right here. So this is the topic of sort of your general experience in China, James.
Yes, indeed. There were a lot of eyes on me when I was walking those streets, which is expected. You know, there are very many people in the country, and there's not many people as tall as me in that country as well. I'm 6'4", so yeah, I was a the tallest of sore thumbs out there. So which was, like I said, is expected. And the reason that quote came by is my roommate at the time in the summer camp, Daniel Borg, my favorite Mancunian. Tease, by the way. He asked me, who do you think will get the most attention when we're out? Because this was our first time actually roaming the streets without supervision or without being in a big group. And I said, well, obviously it's going to be me, because even out of all the British people, I think I'm one of 2 black people here. So I'm going to be the more rarer of a fine. And then, yeah, we were walking down to the shops together, and he said, yeah, it's like, you're definitely right. You got more attention. It was like having a really hot girl that everyone kept staring at, because, you know, people were just looking at me a lot more than him. So I think that that quote really does sum up a lot of my experiences being in.
And how about you, Sabrina?
Yeah, I think that quote does resonate a lot, definitely, with the whole mentality in China. Like, foreigners are always being looked at, I suppose. But I think particularly in James' case, it was going to be more. I think in Shanghai, for me, it's there's a lot of foreigners in Shanghai. So when I was in Shanghai, I wouldn't feel it as much. But I did travel quite a lot to other parts of China. But when I was in other parts of China, you do feel it. They're quite blunt. They will just get their phone out. And not ask permission. So in England that would never happen, but in China it would just happen, and you could look really bad that day, but you got no choice. The camera's going to be in your face and they'll be looking at you. But in Shanghai, I must say, it was less of the case. But I was working in some of the more rural parts of Shanghai, so you would feel it a bit more there, definitely. Um, Largely positive. They were quite excited to see someone. Yeah.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that, especially with the Shanghai, because I lived in Chongzhou, which is in the Jiangsu province. It's about an hour and a half train ride away from Shanghai, and I think my city was a bit more like you're describing, where, you know, there's many foreign people there, and the phones are out away, and the people are just really glued to you because there aren't as many foreigners. But in Shanghai, literally, when I went there, I almost felt like it was an escape, because, like I said, there's a lot more foreign people there, so not as mesmerized, and even the ones that are, they're a bit more subtle about it, because they kind of have to be to, you know, integrate with they're not as impressed or wowed. So, yeah. And even so, in that case, I had a friend, my friend Connor Adams. He visited Shanghai, and I met him there because he was just traveling around Asia, and he was walking around with me in Shanghai, and he literally whispered to me, he was like laughing, he was like, oh, you weren't joking about the amount of attention you get, were you? And I was like, you think this is bad? Come to Changzhou, then you'll see a lot of attention. For me, it was tame for me compared to what I was in the parts of China in Shanghai. But to him, because he's just like come from Britain, he thought that what the attention I was getting was crazy. So it kind of shows how many levels there are to you know, the attention you get and how people play it off.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I think every city is different.
So for me, in terms of my experience in a city like Wuhan, I think what's interesting here is that for me it was a good few years before you guys in terms of that. I think it was yeah. I mean, I stood out a lot. Certainly, I think, you know, just walking the streets, there was a lot of attention. I worked at a private training center, so I typically sort of, when I was out with other foreigners. And I do, yeah, like you guys, I'm sure have experienced all the time as well. That there was always this kind of, you know, this attention on all of us, and the people saying la why, you know, things like that. So it was a big thing. It's interesting though that when I go back to China now, it's partly because probably I'm more used to it. In a city like Wuhan, I find it a little bit less the case already. But like you guys said, in the biggest cities, like in Shanghai and Beijing, I got very little of it in recent terms, in terms of especially compared to the bigger cities. But I think, James,
Yeah.
one of the things we've been talking about since finishing the book is the I guess this is already going into the second topic to some extent, but how you process that, because I think a lot of the people have mentioned that there's a celebrity aspect to it. But I just want to ask you, did you feel that the way you were viewed, did it feel different to you, or was it the same?
That's the thing, because it's so hard to interpret. You're so new to it all, and because the attention you get is a lot of out of curiosity and just the fact that you're a rare sighting. It's hard to interpret how they see you or what kind of stereotypes there. Because if a group of like people in me in a weird way because of my race, I know the stereotypes that they've got in their mind. For seeing a tall black guy from South London, I know what they think of me already, so I know how to process that. I think you're a bunch of idiots. I'll keep walking. You don't know me, but here over there, so many questions and they're so open to interpretation. You just kind of have to try and come to some conclusions. So yeah, I think that is it can be kind of better and worse sometimes, because at times you can think, oh, it's just pure innocence. They much can kind of let your imagination get carried away, or maybe my imagination was correct. Like, that's the thing we don't know. But yeah, in terms of that, I do feel like perspective is plays a huge role, because, or should I save that for the when you bring up
No,
the quote?
I think we'll get into that now, actually. Then, so there's this one.
Yeah, as I said, perspective plays a huge role, because like I said, as a black man from South London, I've been subject to many stereotypes just from the color of my skin, from people, from police, from anyone. So I'm used to my race being perceived as negative from people that aren't. So if I get treated differently, even in another setting, because I'm black, my natural instinct is to think it must be it's probably something negative. They probably have a negative stereotype, because it's not just the UK, around the world. As much as we know less about China, pretty much around the world, stereotypes for black people are unanimous with something negative, fortunately. Whereas with white people, there's white privilege everywhere, and if a white person's race is highlighted, it's normally due to a positive thing, or because they usually have some sort of advantage from it. So get people pointing and staring, trying to take pictures, they might think, oh yeah, they just love and this, when in reality they could be getting ridiculed or looked down on just as much as me, but because they're not used to it, they just jump to that positive conclusion. Or maybe they might see me as my beautiful black skin, but because I'm so used to being perceived as negative, I just I don't see it that way. But there's a lot to unravel, because I did feel like the celebrity thing, it can sometimes it feels like that, like they're just like wow, or and other times there are other people where it kind of feel like a freak show, and that's obviously not a nice feeling to have. So it's hard to just pinpoint it all, because like China's a huge country, there are over 1 billion people, there's going to be different perspectives. So all the different ideas that popped in my head of how they're perceiving me, they could have all been right depending on the individual. So it's literally a case by case thing.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point, James, and I think it's true, because I'm mixed race. My mom is white, and I was talking to her about this very topic, and the thing that she mentioned, that when she's in Kenya or something like that, that she gets the same treatment. She will be stands out a lot of interest, and like you said, it's probably not something that would bother her because of for the reasons you mentioned. So it is a lot down to interpretation. So one thing we were talking about before is about the amount of pictures we got taken, and we came to some interesting conclusions on that. But Sabrina, what was it like for you in terms of your general experience and people asking for pictures and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite common, fairly common in terms of I'm looking back, and it was very common to have the photo, and I used to positively do it. Most of the time, it would feel quite a positive thing. Like they were just excited to see someone that looked different. That's how I perceived it. It was like, oh, they were excited to see someone look different, and it was like selfie, very fast, very quick. There was no real follow-up. Like for me, normally it would be like, I'll get to know, like even just to talk to someone, to ask a question, but it was just about, in China, they're very just quite, they just want to have a photo, they just want to have something to store. So when you, it's interesting what you guys were just talking about, because I've never really delved into it as deep as that. And it's interesting because you want to think about why did that happen, and what were their thoughts behind it. And linking back to your point before as well, it'd be quite interesting it would have been quite good actually to have a white person that went to China with us today, to just hear about how their experience was when they were getting the photos. Did they think it was did it boost their sort of like their feelings? Like, did they feel more positive about themselves, or did it annoy them as well? I don't know. It'd be quite interesting to hear their perspective, or even just to do a little study on that, like psychologically, did it make them feel boosted as a race? Like, it's interesting.
You know what? No, that's a good point you bring up, because I feel like the white men I speak to, I think at first they enjoy the attention, especially from the women. They'll ask, "Oh, do you know Chinese?" and be flirting with them. But towards the end as well, I feel like one of the stereotypes about white Europeans is that they come from a lot of money, because a lot of European countries are like have strong economies and whatnot. So they kind of assume about the people that reside from there. And so the guy I spoke to, they did say like it kind of gets old pretty quick when you realize, there's some of the people that are talking to you, just they kind of it's not because of you, it's because they see you as like a status of wealth, and they're on to that, as opposed to just being good looking or having a sense or whatnot.
Yeah, it's difficult to find what's genuine and what's not. I think that's true, actually, definitely. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Every race in China has a different. Every race that visits China seems to have a different type of experience. It's very unique. It's very complex. The topic today is very complex.
It certainly is. And I think this is the thing that we've been talking about, because I think, James, one of the things that stood out a lot to me when I was reading your book, and I hear this all the time at orientation days, I've always been wondering about, is the picture taking, because that's something that I've heard a lot about from people. I've really not been asked for that many pictures in China, and especially when I was reading your book, I was starting to feel like I've missed out on something, because it was a very regular thing for you, wasn't it? Like, to be asked for pictures.
Yeah, that was such a regular occurrence. I don't think I'd left the house for more than like half an hour without someone either taking a picture of me or not, or asking me to take one. I think that was definitely a celebrity aspect of it. A lot of pictures. I had literally people like men ushering their wife and kids into my arms so I could pose with them and have a photo. Babies, posing with friends. That's really a lot of photos. Some of them really good, and I look back and I was like, it's a great experience. And but also where people literally try and just like I'll just be on the bus or something, and they'll just like angle their phone and try and be sneaky. Some just the ones that annoyed most, ones that had like no respect. I'll just be literally, I don't know, on my phone or something. They just put their camera up and just take the picture. I was like, come on, like that, like have a bit of subtlety or decorum. That was a bit like that will happen as well. There were certain times where there were times where I just wasn't in the mood, and if someone took a picture of me without permission, I'd walk up to them and just almost like half take the phone and be like, yeah, delete it, and they would. Because I felt like it is a bit of a violation of privilege at times, I understand I'm a bit of a spectacle, but I'm just trying to exist at the end of the day, especially living there for a year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think, hearing that from you and hearing it from a lot of the white teachers on the program, it does seem that complexion is a factor in that, that someone who maybe is either white or darker skinned is potentially stands out more to some extent in China, and is more of interest to the people than perhaps myself or Sabrina in that sense. But something I want to get to in this part of the conversation, James, is the section in your book about your students, because I think that is certainly to me, it was one of the most memorable parts of the book. So if you maybe speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, like when I first got to the school, there was quite a few experiences. Like everyone, I'd get called, yeah, hello black teacher, or hello teacher black, which inspired the name of the book. That's what they call teacher black. It was like if a kid in the UK called me teacher black when I was teaching, like straight to their teacher's office, your parents are being called, like that's not on. But whereas in China, I kind of took the same approach as your mom did in Kenya, just being observant. I'm a teacher and I'm black, so they call me teacher black. It's just, yeah, 2 + 2 = 4. But then I remember one time I don't know why even, I thought I just challenged the notion. I remember one kid, I think he was about 8 or 9, that ran past me and he just ran. He said, "Hello, teacher black." And I said, "What did you say?" Turned around, he like froze. He was like, "Oh, I said, hello, teacher James." So I was like, "Okay, you knew my name. Like I'm one of the kids you're one of the kids I taught." So obviously I can't remember every kid I taught. I taught over 1,000 kids. So yeah, but him, I was like, okay. So you knew you were being disrespectful, because if you didn't, you would have just said hello, teacher black again, and thought nothing of it. So you knew what you were doing. You knew you were mocking me. So when that penny drops, I was like, okay, I'm in a situation here. Yeah, I kind of took it upon myself to pretty much teach kids like that's not okay. So like if older kid said it to me, I would stop them and like I'd say be stern. I'd say don't ever say that again, and they'd be like, okay, sorry, teacher. Or if it was a younger kid, about like 6 or 7, I just pull them to the side gently and say, "No, my name's not Teacher Black, it's Teacher James. Don't call me that again, okay?" And they'll say, just laugh, say, "Okay, Teacher James," and like run off, listen. And other situations as well where yeah, one kid asked if I was made of chocolate. I had another situation where a kid, I think my hand on the desk, and he ran his finger down my arm to see if the black would come off, and like he looked at it, he was like, ugh, and it's like, so I feel like that is that's in the context of where they live as well. So it's not just like not coming to the conclusions themselves of the society they live in. They always certain preconceived notions of black skin, and that's what kind of drew me to some conclusions that some of the attention I'm getting wasn't necessarily just celebrity, or it wasn't a lot of it might not have been positive. And I think that's when I started to get a bit more defensive and wary of eyes on me, to be honest.
Yeah. To me, reading that section, I find it difficult to read. I find it upsetting, and also something that really made me reflect on my own experience in that regard. Because for me, going to China, I've made a really good Chinese friend at university, and I think we'll come to that later in the conversation. That I think that was a very important factor for me overall in knowing someone, and that defined China to me. Is the guy I lived with for 2 years, or was my flatmate. And that was a very positive first introduction to China, and therefore everything else that happened, even though at times I was very aware of these kind of things in China, because I came across them, although much milder than you, I think, in this sense. But I was always a little bit on guard for it, and worried that it might happen. And if it had happened to me in that same way, I would have found it very difficult. In terms of my own experiences with students, it never did to that certainly not like to that extent. What was it like for you, Sabrina?
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, there was nothing ever happened in schools when I was working in Shanghai, but there was one thing that did happen, and it stands out. It's the one thing that I remember. And I think I've repressed the memory actually, because my husband's the one who reminded me of it, because I remember I spoke to him about it that day when it happened. Because I did, anyway, I'll tell you what happened before I go on rambling. But essentially, I was tutoring a young girl. I think she was like grade 1 or grade 2. So she's quite young, maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I would go there after my classes. I would go there to teach her English for an hour. And I remember she sort of turned to me and she said, "Oh," because I was teaching her colours that day, so she was a beginning level of English. I remember she pointed to me and she said brown, and she said, "Ugly, you're ugly." And I remember I was like, no, brown is beautiful. And I was like repeating that to her. I was like, no, brown is beautiful too. But I could see I hadn't convinced her. I didn't tell her mom. Her mom wasn't there, I think, at the time or anything. I remember leaving that day thinking, and I was a bit down. I remember I felt it. I was like, oh, and I remember I spoke to Birkin at the time, who was like a really close friend. But I think I repressed that memory for some reason, which is quite interesting. It's the only time anything happened in terms of my actual teaching in the classes. I don't know if the Chinese teachers told them not to be like that. I'm not sure. It's hard for me to say. But largely, I never experienced anything apart from that one occasion. I remember the young girl saying that to me very directly and very bluntly. You could tell that she had been taught that that was something that was wrong. You could tell that she had definitely had the wrong thing. I thought, she's such an innocent, such a young child to be seeing colour in that way. But I must say, in terms of my other school experiences, I never had that experience when I was actually teaching. This was like a private tutoring class girl. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think for me as well, to explain a little bit more the context of the feelings I had, is that I was aware of this in the sense that, and I don't know how it was like for you guys, but for me, what stands out actually, ironically, is some of the comments of my colleagues who were very well intentioned, but made me more uneasy at the time, because they would really say things like, it was things like, how are they treating you? How are they treating you? Or I remember that someone at my school would say something like, I think they're accepting you. I think so. And that made me quite uneasy. And I think, in terms of China, obviously, what's come up quite regularly during orientation days and things like that is the skin whitening products in beauty products and things like that. And I think that's quite a big factor. And I think that is in part because of, the background that people with fairer skin are seen to be sort of wealthier, or maybe with darker skin are more seen to do work in the fields or things like that. But I don't know to what extent that applies to foreigners necessarily, but that's a thing that applies for Chinese people, I think, when it comes to skin tone.
Yeah, I think one thing that that applies to foreigners is that one thing that sticks out to me as well is one time I was at the train station with my girlfriend. I actually talked about it in the book, where a kid walked up to us, and because she's Indian as well, and her skin's a bit lighter than mine, well, a lot lighter than mine, and the girl said to her, she was like, "Oh, you look," to her, she said, "You look more like us than he does." So I was like, "Oh," so kind of like Chineseness has pretty much become like the parameter. So that's the bar. Like being Chinese is like the ultimate, and like the further you stray away from Chineseness is like, kind of like I don't know how to say it, like not the less they think of you, but it kind of is. Not the in terms of how you look, it's kind of like the less Chinese you're, kind of like the lower you are in like the pecking order for them. There's not really like it's very superficial, not really like, oh, you're black, oh, it's not like here it's like, oh, you're ex-slaves and stuff, and there's, oh, you're criminals, or all these weird stereotypes that they all receive. It's literally, you look less than these lot. I was thinking, and it made me think, is it that simple for the rest of like everyone, or is that just more what young people think, because is quite collectivist, and they obviously have high regard for like their country and like what they think of each other.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to say actually, because I was speaking to my friend, and he said, like in China, they've always had this, even in the history, they've always had this feeling that they are Tianxia, like everything else is, they're at the center of the world, like Zhongguo, China means middle, like country. Exactly. So they always see like China's a center, like none of the other anything else matters. So I think they still have that mentality in some ways as the center of the world. It's interesting, and then everything else is sort of in a hierarchy around them in some ways.
Absolutely. Then again, a lot of countries think that in a way, but certainly that is
exactly. Britain included.
Oh, definitely.
So now, I think what's interesting about this topic, because this is actually where I've really enjoyed sort of talking to you guys the past few weeks and reflecting on it, because I think we've all had some of these experiences, and they're not necessarily pleasant, obviously. I think what's interesting then is to think and try to understand like why I started teaching English in China, why you guys sort of have another. There's definitely a big other side to this, and that's why I wanted to kind of introduce the next topic. So let's get that one up.
Yes. I think that was one of my first experiences with Chinese hospitality. Me and Anthony, the other black foreign teacher that I was working with in school, who's from America and a good friend of mine, we got taken out, Kathy, our supervisor, for the steak dinner. It was amazing, and they were just courteous and just wanted to make sure we were well. Even I finished my plate pretty quickly, and without even flinching, she's like, do you want another plate? I was like, okay, thanks. Like, there was just no hesitation, accommodating, and they do in terms of just like your person to person experience to people, to a lot with people in China you actually cross paths with on more than superficial way. Like, they really do look out for you and try to make sure that things are going well for you. They want you to have a good time. They want to put a smile on your face more often than not.
Definitely, I can echo that.
Like,
absolutely, I can echo what James is saying there, because I have never felt hospitality. I thought like Indians, they're quite good with hospitality. Like, I must say, like my parents, no one will leave our house here without full stomach, etc., etc. But when I went to China, like there were cases obviously that we've just talked about, some negativity, but the large of it was so positive. Like, the hospitality was insane. Like, I miss the kindness of the Chinese people, because like my colleagues, I remember they took me to Jiuzhajiao, like the water town in Shanghai, and they just insisted on, it's not, money doesn't matter, but they just paid for everything. But they went that extra mile to just like, for me to experience every little thing, like putting the goldfish in the water and all these different things, like the boat trip. And they're not rich, they're earning significantly less than I was as Chinese teachers, but they were insisting on making me feel happy, and I thought that was really nice. Like, I can write a whole book about the hospitality of China. It was amazing. I miss that. I miss the kindness and the community. And because here in England, you can walk around, like in Birmingham, there's some areas where you can walk around, no one's really talking to anyone. But in China, you can feel that there is that attitude of like talking to each other, which is quite nice.
A sense of community, yeah.
Absolutely. I think, reflecting on this part of it, I really just came to the conclusion that basically, I know a lot of Chinese people, obviously, from my time there. I'm currently married to a wonderful Chinese woman who I met in the UK long after. And I just felt, for me personally, it's like a lot of the best times I've had are with Chinese people, and probably all the best meals I've had with Chinese people by far. So
yeah,
this is kind of the context for me, is that those personal experiences have overwhelmed any negative. And I think this is what you were also saying, Sabrina, when we were talking about it. And it totally resonated with me, because I think that's the explanation, because I do see this other stuff, but I think this is more powerful in my memory. And also the students itself, when I was in Wuhan, I was working with kind of adults. And that part of it, I just enjoyed so much. I just had a few students that I would see every single day, and we would be playing basketball, and they would take me out for meals. And, it was amazing. It was just really amazing, that part of it, and being welcomed into the country. And that's the most important kind of memory I have, ultimately, of that. So I think I'm sure there's a lot more to say, but I think for now we'll go to the final topic, James. So that is Discord.
Yes. Yes, the ending quote of the book. Spoiler alert. But yeah, that I feel like that quote just kind of summarizes the whole experience, why I went, and why, despite some negative experiences, I have absolutely zero regrets and wouldn't change. It's just the time I found a job, I was unemployed. I was struggling to make a leeway into whatever my career. I was kind of stalling. I weren't really sure about the direction. And I also had urge to travel and to have new experiences. The opportunity fell on my lap, and I was well aware that racism exists in China everywhere, and that it will be a challenge. But moving to any country, like away from home, from all your close friends and family, that's always going to be a challenge, regardless of where you go. Even if I went to Jamaica or Ghana, whereas I'd be part of the majority, I would have had a lot. So yeah, I just for that, I just felt it doesn't really, I won't say it doesn't matter, but you can't let fear of having a hard time stop you from putting your neck out there and just venturing because like I said, sometimes you are the biggest risk may be guaranteeing that things will stay the same. Like if I did China, who knows what I would have done for the year leading up to China and that year as well. And knows like my CV would have been a lot less impressive without having China on my CV. So I would have struggled. I may have still been struggling for a considerably long time to make my CV stand out from others and to get into work. So yeah, you just have to. On life, you gotta make the most of it. Some of the decisions won't be easy, and usually the best decisions aren't easy. You've got to go through some, hard times to have some great. And like I said in my book as well, it was probably up to that point in my life. It was this year, but easily the best year. Both you can have hard times and have a great time at the same time. They're not, they're not polar opposites.
Definitely. I think like taking that risk is worth it. Like if you've got any sort of hesitations about anything, the food, the racism as a topic, religion, whatever it might be, you can tackle it. And China is versatile. Like you can go there and somewhere beneath amongst anything, you can find some goodness amongst it in some way or another. Definitely, it's an experience. And the impact that, for example, James had, like when you left and you were like, damn, they didn't say teacher black or for a month or something like that, and you didn't even realize that you'd had that impact, and you reflected and you were like, it happened. I read that and I was like, wow, like you, even if something negative does happen, you will grow from it, and you will have an impact on the experience, and that will always be with you. And the CV, like definitely you stand out going to such a significant part of the world, which is so significant at the moment as well in terms of the future post-Brexit world. It's really
in terms of the book. I really want to echo what you said, Sabrina, about James's impact, because this is the thing. Like when I do interviews now, I really enjoy it because it's such an interesting thing to talk to people about previous experiences they've had with teaching, and almost to a person. The thing that people always bring up is that there was one person, like one teacher they had, that they want to be like, because they just stood out, like 15, 20 years later, 10 years later, that they were memorable presence. And just like what Sabrina said, when I read that part of your book, James, and the change you brought about in them, I'm sure that you're that person for them. I'm 100% sure, and I'm also sure they know they know you're James, and you probably changed their view on the UK or their understanding of that, and that's a big deal, basically. That's just amazing. And then finally, I think in terms of other final points I would want to bring up, is just to see the individual, because I remember thinking going to China, what's China like? What's everyone's going to be like? And with every single individual class I used to teach, and the more I got to know the individual people, the less I thought of that, and it's more just this person. And that's the thing with China. It's just such a huge country, and you have every part of the spectrum represented. So I think the more you can just get to know individuals and make friends and all of this, that's probably the best way to alleviate any concerns you have on this topic.
100%, and you'll get ample opportunities to present themselves to become like good friends with Chinese people there. I said everyone's like very hospitable. People will approach you on the street just to talk and just to get to know you better. I remember even once I was just walking down like through a park, and school dude literally ran out the basketball court, like, come play basketball with us. I was like, okay, and that's a friend, that's like a group of friends. So yeah, definitely the personal experience I had with individual Chinese people definitely trump all the annoyances that came with the camera phones and painting and whatever and other things. So yeah, and as well as I think like you were saying before, like very humbled by what you said about me being that teacher for people. But even teaching aside, all of us, if we do that have gone or that will go in a show, have the opportunity to be trailblazers. A lot of people that do approach you, you'll be their first experience of actually speaking to a Black or Indian or white English person or wherever you're from, and you have a chance to set a precedent for them. And it's really up to you whether that's a positive or negative. But just take the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure seeing you again this way and discussing the book. Guys, if you've listened to this podcast and if you're interested, definitely get James's book. We'll put a link in the description to this video. Also, if there's any individual questions you have about sort of things that have come up, I'll put my email address. I don't know how you guys feel about potentially having your email address in the description of the video as well, if people want to follow up with us. Okay, great. So we'll do that. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and you guys for this conversation.
That's been a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.